All right, I got the man, Dr. Ethan Turner, right next to me because we've got three guys that he wants to avoid in dynasty leagues this year. And we're going to kick it off with somebody that I had high expectations for. The Broncos had high expectations for. Javonte Williams. Do we have high expectations heading into 2023, or are we worried, Ethan?
I'm very worried about Javonte Williams, Kyle. The problem with Javonte is he falls into this trap that we've gotten ourselves into with fantasy where we see ACL tear and we just instantly assume 9 months and they're back. And we look at the timeline and we say, oh, Javonte Williams tore his ACL early in the season. He's going to have 12 months to come back. He will be totally 100% fine. The problem is this was not a clean ACL tear. ACL, PCL, LCL. Basically, the dude's knee was barely hanging on after this injury. You're looking at about 12 to 14 months. Very similar to J.K. Dobbins last year, a guy I told people to avoid. Many people didn't listen to me. He was not ready until about midway through the season. And the issue is that we actually got some good reports at this time last year about J.K. Dobbins. We have not gotten good reports about Javonte Williams. Matthew Berry mentioned that at the combine he heard that the Broncos were worried about Javonte Williams' knee, and they're the ones that see him every single day. The fact that he heard that and the injury was more complex tells me I'm totally staying away from Javonte. Let's see it before we invest any significant capital in them. And don't forget, the Broncos, who also know what his status is better than any of us, signed Samaje Perine, a guy who very similarly plays a similar style to Javonte Williams. So they're even telling us with the moves they're making in free agency, they don't know if this guy's going to be 100% healthy.
So then follow-up question to that real quick. Let's say I'm a team that heading into 2023, I don't feel like I have a shot anyway. And maybe there's a contender out there with Javonte Williams. Would you be okay trying to maybe acquire him and then maybe wait for like 2024 when you think your team might be a little bit more, in the competing side of things?
I think it depends on what the price is to acquire him. If you're paying a first, I would rather just draft a running back that I think is worth a first. I'm definitely not getting anywhere close to the top half of the first round. And I feel like that's what people will ask for. Similar situation to J.K. Dobbins. Even if you had acquired him for a first, you were not happy with his production. And I don't think you could get a first for J.K. Dobbins this year. So we're talking 2 years later, still not getting the value. I just don't see it, Kyle. I don't see a good way unless you're getting him for like a second and some change. I just don't see any way that I would be investing in him.
All right, so Javonte Williams is off the Doc's board for 2023. Just be cautious out there with him if you're trying to acquire him, because it might not be worth it. But let's move to the quarterback position. And this is a guy that I'm very familiar with because he played essentially his entire career in Detroit, Matthew Stafford, but it's a lot of the same thing his second year in Los Angeles. The back, everything, it just feels like the guy continues to break down.
Yeah, spinal cord contusion, couple concussions last year. Stafford has always, and being a Lions fan, you know this, he's always been banged up and played through. The problem is the guy's 35 years old now. And so how long can you let your body get broken down repeatedly before you start to go, hey, I've made enough money. I don't need to put myself through this anymore. We saw this happen with Andrew Luck, very similar situation. A litany of injuries that cumulatively, each individual injury was not crazy, but cumulatively it does wear down on your mental psyche. There were talks that he could not throw hardly at all after this neck injury. At what point does he decide to hang it up? Maybe in a super flex league, if you can get him super cheap, I'd possibly take a risk on it. But I just don't think that he is going to have the length of career that justifies putting any kind of stock in him. If you have him, you're basically holding him until he retires.
So if you're worried about Matthew Stafford, are you worried about any other players? Essentially, I'm talking about Mr. Cooper Kupp, who's really the big fantasy option there. Are you worried about him or any other of the players in the Rams organization? And you're saying, hey, because Stafford's banged up, I can't trust any of them.
Yeah, I think that Cooper Kupp is probably the one that sticks out the most. He's been banged up last year too, so it's not like he has been a spring chicken in the last year. Now, we're only 2 years removed from them being a Super Bowl contender, so it's not impossible that the Rams can turn it around, but they're starting to show some signs that maybe they don't think they have it anymore. Their free agency moves say that. They're letting guys go because they're too expensive. They're trading key pieces to that Super Bowl run in Jalen Ramsey. I feel like the Rams are telling us that they think the window's closed or close to closing, and that's not good for fantasy.
Now, the Detroit Lions, I think they kind of shocked everybody, especially me, when they decided to forego re-signing Jamal Williams.
Yes.
And they went with David Montgomery instead. And from what I heard in certain reports from the Detroit media was they offered Jamal Williams the same contract they offered David Montgomery. They waited, couldn't wait anymore, went with Montgomery instead. He accepted the offer. And now DeAndre Swift owners are freaking out once again, because instead of having like ground and pound Jamal Williams running next to him, where you're like, okay, he's not really going to get a whole lot of passing work, we've got David Montgomery, who's a more complete running back running next to him now. So that paired with what we've seen DeAndre Swift injury history wise, you're off him in 2023, correct?
I am. And this one's going to surprise a lot of people, because if you look at his injury history, and I have been tracking it since he entered the league, his history dates back to high school. And the problem with Swift is that if you're not experienced with what injuries mean going forward, you might go, hey, this is normal wear and tear. This is just what happens. But let me read you this, Kyle. I wrote this back in 2020 prior to the NFL draft that year about DeAndre Swift and his injury history. Tell me if this rings a bell. So this was 3 years ago. Okay. Swift's injuries are primarily just classic wear and tear for a running back. His ability to play through most games shows his toughness, but he appears to stay healthy when used in a pass catching role as part of a committee. Nothing in his history raises a red flag, but the accumulation of soft tissue injuries and their higher risk of re-injury is worth noting. That was 3 years ago. He's missed 3 games a year since then in the NFL. The guy, I don't know if people want to admit it, he has been basically a bust every year he has played where you're drafting him at. Because if you're drafting him in the top 12 running backs, he's not finishing the year there. And so that's my concern going forward is he 1 year away from them saying, yeah, you just can't cut it. You can't cut it as a lead back. You can't stay healthy. And it's very possible that they've figured it out, something I knew 3 years ago, and said, hey, we're just going to have to pair you with another competent running back to keep you healthy so that you can have 4 or 5 big games a year. But just know he's prone to the soft tissue injuries. That type of injury history does not usually age well. And so I am concerned about DeAndre Swift. I've been concerned about him since he came out, and he's done nothing to prove that wrong. So I don't think he's a terrible pick. But I think if you're taking him and paying up for him, you're paying for a top 6 potential and you're getting top 25 results. That is very, very dangerous in Dynasty. And you could be left holding the bag if these injuries catch up to him and he misses a significant amount of time.
Well, speaking as somebody that obviously is a Lions fan, has watched him closely over the last couple of years, he was drafted by the old regime. He was not drafted by Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. And quite honestly, he's not a Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell type of player. Even Deuce Staley, before he ended up leaving, made comments last preseason about how DeAndre Swift needs to learn the difference between like being injured and being hurt. Yeah. And they purposely last year tried to limit his touches preseason and to start the year. They said out loud, we need to keep this guy healthy. And he still didn't stay healthy. And I think that's one of the reasons why they signed David Montgomery. He's a little bit of a younger back than Jamal Williams, but I don't think DeAndre Swift is going to be in Detroit after next season. He is going into the final year of his contract. I think this will be it for him. And then they will move on and they'll do something else to pair with David Montgomery. Who knows? Maybe they spend a pick on a running back in this year's draft in the mid rounds to try and maybe start getting ready to go to help replace him. But Ethan, I'm throwing one off the cuff to you real quick. I didn't tell you this was coming. I want a quick 30-second breakdown. Will OBJ be healthy this year?
No.
Nope.
No, probably not.
Ooh.
Probably not. I'm sorry. I want everyone to be healthy. I think he will get signed somewhere. I think he will play in games. But what evidence do we have over the last 5 years that he can actually stay healthy for a full season?
It's not out there.
He's been on my do not draft list that we do for the draft guide, which, by the way, hits at an 80% rate. I'd like to see anybody else compete with that. And will be expanded this year. Let the record show that it's going to be a longer list. OBJ has topped that list 2 years in a row, and I've been right both years.
Oh. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. 4 quick players on you. If you're in Dynasty leagues, we're not looking to acquire these guys. The doc is worried about their injury histories, their injury profiles, as I like to say, and we're concerned about them going forward, not only for 2023, but how they hold up for years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, as you head out of here, hit that like button for me, tap that subscribe button down below. Let me know down in the comments, is there anybody that you're worried about injury wise? The doc who likes to scroll through the comments, maybe you'll get an answer directly from him. But appreciate everybody tuning into this video. Peace out, stay safe and healthy. Ethan, kick it over to you to say goodbye.
Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.
Later, everybody.